The sky over Crete tore open on the morning of 20 May 1941. It was not the sun that appeared, but thousands of German parachutes and gliders, a silent invasion fleet descending into the olive groves and rocky hills. Watching this first great airborne assault in history was Lieutenant General Bernard Freyberg, a soldier of legendary courage, now tasked with defending the last Allied foothold in the eastern Mediterranean. And he was not surprised. Through Britain's top-secret ultra-code-breaking, Freyberg had been handed the enemy's plan, the date, the hour, even the airfields they would target. Yet here, with that priceless knowledge in his hands, the battle began to slip away. How does a commander who has read the enemy's exact orders still lose an island? This is the story of the general who knew everything, and of the secret history that would take decades to unravel. The man entrusted with Crete was Lieutenant General Bernard Freyberg. To understand the weight of what followed, you must first understand the weight of the man himself. Born in 1889 and raised in New Zealand, he was a dentist by trade. He was also a champion swimmer, and he became one of the most physically courageous soldiers of his generation. At Gallipoli in 1915, he swam ashore alone through the freezing dark-to-light decoy flares on a hostile beach, drawing enemy fire away from the main landings. For that act of cold, solitary daring, he was awarded the Distinguished Service Order. A year later, on the Somme, he led his battalion from the front through 4 days of brutal fighting, holding a captured trench under relentless fire and counterattack. That earned him the Victoria Cross. He was wounded 9 times in the Great War. Winston Churchill, fascinated by the map of scars on Freyberg's body, nicknamed him the Salamander, the mythical creature that lives in fire. This was no staff officer plotting moves from a distant headquarters. This was a man who had built his legend in the mud and the blood, who had earned every ounce of his men's trust and his superiors' faith with his own body. Remember that, because the battle for Crete and the blame that followed it would threaten to burn all that away. And so Bernard Freyberg, the Salamander, the man who thrived in fire, faced an impossible task. After the disaster in Greece, Crete was the last Allied foothold in the eastern Mediterranean, and Churchill insisted it be held. The order was absolute. Freyberg was handed the job, and handed half an army. On paper, he commanded roughly 40,000 men, but this was a battered, improvised force. New Zealanders, Australians, British and Greeks, many had just been evacuated from the mainland, arriving with little more than their rifles and the uniforms on their backs. They were short of everything that wins battles. Artillery was scarce, transport was a trickle, radios were few, and tanks were virtually non-existent. Worst of all, the skies belonged to the enemy. The RAF had been withdrawn, leaving the island naked to the Luftwaffe. He had numbers, yes, but he had almost none of the things that make an army fight. And he had only days to prepare. Across the sea, the enemy, already victorious across Europe, was finalizing its plans. Freyberg stood on the cliffs of Crete, looking out at a darkening horizon, with a phantom army and a concrete order: hold. And then, he was handed the ultimate weapon. The secret, through Ultra, Britain's most closely guarded weapon, the breaking of the German Enigma codes, Freyberg was handed what almost no commander in history has ever had: the enemy's plan in detail. A massive airborne assault to seize the 3 airfields, Maleme, Rethymno, Heraklion. He knew the day, he knew the drop zones, he knew the shape of the storm about to fall from the sky, but the knowledge came with 2 brutal catches. The same intelligence also warned of a seaborne landing, a powerful follow-up wave by sea, and he could not act too openly on Ultra. To visibly strip the coast and mass everything on the airfields, or to crater the runways, risked screaming to the Germans that their codes were broken. That was a secret worth more than one island. It was a secret protecting the entire war. So he knew everything, and yet he could not use everything he knew. He had to make his dispositions look like a reasonable guess, not a perfect foreknowledge. He weighted his defense heavily against the sea threat, keeping strong forces on the northern coast. The airfields were defended, but more thinly than hindsight would later scream they should have been. Knowledge came with a leash, and the man holding that leash now had to fight the coming battle with one hand tied behind his back, gambling that he could stop the airborne assault with what he had, while keeping the greatest secret of the war locked safely away in his mind. You have read the enemy's mail. You know the date, you know the hour. You know the blow will come from the sky, at Maleme, Rethymno, Heraklion, but the same secret whispers of a convoy by sea. You have roughly 40,000 men, a patchwork force short of everything: guns, trucks, radios, planes. They are not enough for even one threat. And you must guard against both. The arithmetic is impossible. Mass your strength at the airfields, and you leave the coast open to invasion. You also risk signaling to Berlin that their codes are broken, sacrificing a weapon more valuable than any single island. Spread your defense thin, and you hold everything weakly. There is no right answer here, only a choice between disasters. You choose to spread. You weight the defense toward the coast, fearing the sea. You hold the airfields, Maleme included, with too little. The New Zealanders on Hill 107 overlooking that critical runway are stretched to their limit. You make this calculation in silence, bearing the weight of a secret you cannot share, even with your own commanders. The knowledge that could save Crete might also doom the wider war if revealed. So you stand on the cliffs, watching the empty sea, waiting for the storm you have been told is coming, hoping your thin red line will be enough where it must be. The storm arrives not from the sea, but from the sky. At dawn on 20 May 1941, the drone of aircraft swells into a roar over Crete. The first wave of Junkers Ju-52s appears, and the sky darkens with parachutes. General Kurt Student's Operation Mercury has begun. But Freyberg's waiting defenders, forewarned, are ready. What follows is a slaughter. German paratroopers of the elite Fallschirmjager are shot in their harnesses, cut down as they land on rocky fields and olive groves. They are killed before they can reach their weapons canisters. Gliders crack apart on the terrain. The element of surprise, the cornerstone of airborne assault, is utterly lost. For the invaders, the first hours are a catastrophe. One German battalion lands roughly 600 men. By day's end, only about 200 are left alive. The defenders are winning. The New Zealanders, Australians, British, and Greeks, alongside Cretan civilians armed with whatever they have, fight with a ferocity that staggers the attackers. The airfields at Maleme, Rethymno, and Heraklion become killing zones. For a few desperate hours, it seems the entire invasion will be thrown back into the sea. The man who knew the plan watches from his headquarters. The intelligence from Ultra appears devastatingly correct. The gamble of holding Crete seems on the brink of a miraculous payoff. The invasion teeters on total disaster. But wars turn on a single point, on a single piece of ground misunderstood or momentarily lost. And that point is coming. Yet before that pivot, the island itself rose. What stunned the Germans most was not only the soldiers but the people. As the paratroopers drifted down, scattered and vulnerable, Cretan civilians emerged from their homes and fields. Farmers, women, old men, even priests fell upon the invaders with whatever they had to hand. Ancient rifles and shotguns cracked. The glint of axes, scythes, and kitchen knives flashed in the olive groves. This was not a polite rebellion. It was primal, a visceral defense of home. It became one of the first mass civilian uprisings against the Nazi war machine, and it enraged the German high command. Their answer was immediate and brutal. In villages like Condamari and Kondanos, they carried out savage reprisal massacres, rounding up and shooting men in cold blood, a grim warning written in blood. This ferocity, from both soldier and civilian, is why the battle's first day was so catastrophic for the invaders. For one bloody, chaotic day, the greatest airborne assault ever launched teetered on the edge of utter annihilation. The Fallschirmjager were being slaughtered in the air and cut down where they landed. One battalion lost roughly 2/3 of its men. The entire German plan, so daring in conception, was unraveling in the dust and blood of 1,000 Cretan fields. But that single point, that piece of ground, still held, and across the wire, a New Zealand commander, isolated and believing his position overrun, was about to make a decision. The pivot was Maleme, and the battle turned not on a grand plan, but on a few hours of confusion in the dark. Above the dusty airstrip sat Hill 107, the key to everything. It was held by the 22nd New Zealand Battalion, men who had fought the German paratroopers to a standstill all day. But their phone lines were cut. Their forward companies, dug in on the lower slopes, could not be reached. In the command post, their silence was misinterpreted as annihilation. The crackle of nearby gunfire, the shouts in the night, all pointed to one conclusion: they were being surrounded, overrun. With no way to confirm, believing he was saving his remaining men from destruction, Lieutenant Colonel Leslie Andrew made the fateful decision. On the night of 20-21 May, the battalion withdrew from Hill 107. They pulled back in good order, but they pulled back. By the first gray light, the high ground overlooking Maleme airfield was empty. The one piece of ground Freyberg could not afford to lose was, through a fog of war made of severed wires and ominous quiet, simply let go. The airfield lay open, and Kurt Student, a gambler to his core, saw the crack in the door. He threw everything he had left at it, landing Junker's transports crammed with mountain troops directly onto the cratered runway under fire. The Allied counterattack, when it came, would be a story of desperate courage and brutal close-quarters fighting, but it would be too late. The story of Crete was rewritten in those silent, decisive hours. If you think a commander handed half an army and a secret he wasn't allowed to use deserves better than to be the man everyone blames, take a second to hit like and subscribe, because the single hour that decided this battle is almost never told the way it really happened. But the story of Crete was not yet over. While the defenders held the line, the German commander, General Kurt Student, was staring at disaster. His elite paratroopers were shattered, his plan in ruins. He had one desperate card left to play: Maleme. The airfield was not yet fully secure, but it was the only one his transports could potentially use. He gambled everything on it. With ruthless determination, he began pouring Junker's Ju-52 transport aircraft onto that single contested strip. They came in under artillery and small arms fire, a relentless, sacrificial shuttle. Some planes crashed on landing, others erupted in flames as they disgorged their cargo, but enough got through. The trickle of reinforcements from the 5th Gebirgsdivision, mountain troops, became a flood. These hardened soldiers, landing directly into the firefight, began to solidify the German foothold. On the Allied side, the critical moment demanded a swift, crushing counterattack. It was ordered for the 21st of May. The spearhead would be the fierce and determined men of the 28th Maori Battalion, alongside other New Zealand units. They were prepared to fight with terrifying courage. But the chaos of the battlefield conspired against them. Communications were shredded, movements were delayed by confusion and the sheer friction of war. By the time the counterattack finally went in, it was too late. They hurled themselves against a foe now dug in, reinforced, and fighting for survival. The door at Maleme, left ajar by a tragic misunderstanding, had been slammed open by Student's gamble. The Allied troops fought with everything they had, but the open door could not be closed again. The lifeline had been secured. The balance of the battle had irrevocably shifted. And yet, even as the German mountain troops poured onto Maleme, Freyberg's gaze remained fixed on the sea. He held back strength, precious battalions and artillery, guarding the beaches against the seaborne invasion he feared most. That threat was not a phantom. A German convoy did sail, packed with heavy equipment and reinforcements. But the Royal Navy's Mediterranean fleet, under Admiral Andrew Cunningham, was waiting. In the darkness of the night of May 21st, Cunningham's warships fell upon the convoy and annihilated it. The sea landing, the blow Freyberg had most dreaded, was shattered before it could reach Crete in force. But the sea's victory was bought with blood. By day, the Luftwaffe owned the sky. They descended upon the fleet with relentless fury. Cunningham's ships, without air cover, became targets. Cruisers and destroyers were smashed and sent to the bottom. The Gloucester was lost, then the Fiji, and others besides. Hundreds of sailors drowned in the burning oil-slicked waters. The cost was catastrophic. Even as the army clung to Crete, the navy was being bled white. Advisors urged Cunningham to withdraw, to stop risking the fleet, to save an army that seemed already lost. His reply was an echo of Nelson: the navy would not abandon the army. "It takes 3 years to build a ship," he declared, "but 3 centuries to build a tradition." Freyberg had defended, faithfully and fatally, against the wrong hand. The decisive blow had come from the air, the hand he could not fully meet, and it had already taken root on the broken ground of Maleme airfield. The fall was now a matter of time. With Maleme airfield functioning as a relentless German artery, fresh Gebirgsjäger mountain troops and equipment poured in, turning the tide irrevocably. The isolated, dogged pockets of Commonwealth and Greek defenders at Rethymno and Heraklion fought on with astonishing tenacity, but they were cut off and could not alter the strategic collapse. Freyberg, his force disintegrating under unrelenting air attack and ground pressure, had one terrible choice left: save what remained of his army. The order went out for a fighting withdrawal south, across the island's brutal, sun-scorched mountain spine. It was a gauntlet of agony. Exhausted men, their discipline fraying but never breaking, trudged along goat tracks under the merciless sun, their every movement shadowed by screaming Stukas that strafed and bombed the columns at will. The goal was the tiny, cliff-bound fishing village of Sfakia, a sliver of hope on the southern coast. The Royal Navy, under Admiral Cunningham's unwavering orders, would try to pluck them from the shore. By the 1st of June, the last organized resistance crumbled. The Navy performed miracles of evacuation under constant bombardment, but time and space ran out. Thousands of Commonwealth and Greek soldiers were left behind on the stony beaches, watching the ships depart, facing years of harsh captivity. Crete had fallen. The island, drenched in the blood of defenders and invaders alike, was now German. Yet the cost of that victory had already written its own epitaph in the skies over Maleme. The twist lay not in the German victory, but in its price. At their headquarters there was no celebration, only a grim accounting. The elite Fallschirmjager had been gutted. Roughly 4,000 of their best lay dead among the olive groves and rocky hillsides. Their precious fleet of Ju-52 transport aircraft was a shattered wreck. Hitler, appalled by the catastrophic losses, would soon forbid any further large-scale airborne operations for the rest of the war. Crete had become, as the Germans themselves would call it, the grave of the paratroopers, a Pyrrhic victory that cost the victor his sharpest weapon. But that strategic consequence was not what stuck to Bernard Freyberg. The ledger of war, written in the bitter aftermath of defeat, recorded one stark and simple fact: he had lost the island. The staggering German casualties became a historical footnote. The desperate evacuation from Sfakia was a clear military defeat. And so the burden was laid, squarely and publicly, on the shoulders of the general who had held the island with half an army. He was the man who, through Ultra, had known the enemy's very plan, and yet had still watched Crete slip from his grasp. The secret that constrained his every move remained locked away for decades, leaving only the bare, brutal outcome for history's first draft: blame. The hidden stratagem. Here is the cruelty. The one thing that could explain Freyberg, Ultra, what he knew and how protecting it tied his hands, stayed locked in a vault for 30 years. He had been warned of the airborne assault, yet the same signals spoke of a seaborne invasion. To act too obviously on the ultra-secret would risk revealing that Britain had broken the German codes, a loss far greater than any island. So he weighted his defense against the sea, holding the airfields more thinly. It was a terrible calculus. When the declassified files finally emerged in the 1970s, the argument reopened. Historians still divide. Some see a commander in an impossible position, fighting with one hand tied behind his back by the very knowledge meant to help him. Others fault his judgment on the ground, the failure to reinforce Maleme, the fatal withdrawal from Hill 107. But by then, the verdict of memory was set in stone. The most dangerous weapon in war is not the sharpest blade or the largest army. It is the story that gets remembered afterward, and who gets to tell it. For a generation, the narrative was simple. Freyberg knew, and Freyberg lost. The secret that shaped every decision remained silent. He was allowed to know everything, and condemned to explain nothing. Here is what I cannot shake about Bernard Freyberg. We like our history clean. A hero or a scapegoat, a winner or a fool. But Freyberg was handed an island he almost certainly could not save, an army that was only half an army, and a secret that let him see the enemy's hand while forbidding him to play his own. He knew everything. He was permitted to say nothing, and for 30 years, the men who understood the truth stayed silent while his name quietly absorbed the blame. So let me put the question to you. If you had been Freyberg, if you had known the blow was coming, but been forbidden to act on how you knew it, do you believe you could have held Crete? Or was this a battle already lost, the moment someone in London decided it had to be fought? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and if these are the stories you come here for, the ones where the official version is quietly hiding something, then subscribe and stay with me, because there is almost always a secret sitting behind the story everyone was told, and we are only getting started.